So, as everybody's aware, the big orange orangutan has launched a trade war with every country in the world, including the penguins. Let's talk a little bit about his fixation with Canada and what ultimately is the kryptonite that we hold. Now, we've all seen Donald Trump go and talk about Canada as the 51st state, and he said that over 100 times in the media. We've also seen him talk about how unfair our trade practices are and how they don't need us. They don't need our aluminum, they don't need our steel, they don't need our wood, water, energy, etc. We've also seen J.D. Vance come out, the other makeup wearing one, come out and say that Canada can't win in a trade war. But here's the thing. Here's what they're forgetting. We have the kryptonite that ultimately could bring down the big orange Oompa Loompa and his many band of fellows. So let me talk to you a little bit about that. Potash. Potash is a deposit deep in the earth that was left behind millions and millions of years ago as the glaciers and the oceans retreated over the plains of our prairies, and they left behind this salt, heavy, rich potassium structure that is mined out of Saskatchewan and is an absolutely necessary ingredient in fertilizer. In fact, farms all over the world use potash, particularly around this time of year as they're laying the seeds down for their very important crop season. 90% of all American potash comes out of Canada. And American farms are quite literally hostage to this. They would not be able to produce nearly the same amount of volumes, nor would they be able to remineralize their land for next season and the season after it without Canadian potash, or without potash, that is. Now, Americans have balked about the Canadian prices of potash in the past. In 1969, the Americans tried to tariff our potash, arguing that our prices were too high. All that really does is jack up the price of the potash that American farms are so dependent on it. And eventually they caved, they stopped their tariffs, and we went on back to selling to our neighbors, as we have done for many, many years. So when Donald Trump jacks up the price of potash by way of Canadian tariffs, what does that mean? Well, 25% tariff on potash means that a ton of potash is now $100 more expensive, okay? $100 pricier per ton of potash. Well, how many tons does America buy from Canada? 10 million. So do the math. 10 million times 100, and it's a damn big number. And this is enough of a price that could drive many, many American farmers into bankruptcy. So we have that kryptonite over them. And that is a tool, okay, that I'm sure is in the back pocket of both Poilievre and Carney and our next government. The only problem is, that I said, is that we are one of two producers of potash in the world. And while we are obviously the favorite, we have to be mindful of who the second producer is. And that is Lex Luthor, of course, is Russia.